Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Chris and Dan. We're back for another episode of A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache. We're excited to have a guest on today to share his story. And I brought him up last episode, and I'm not into TikTok much, but I've been watching his videos, and it's really been another avenue to get the story out. And I really like the way he's doing it. So I asked him if he'd come on, and he was excited and said he was all aboard. So, first off, we have two Dans here today. So we have Dan Cortine, our normal host, with us. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm already confused, but it's all good.
And then we have Dan McCreary. Thank you for coming on, Dan. We really appreciate your time. Like I was saying, to me, it was interesting when you said you were on TikTok and you were sharing your story that way, because that's more typically, from what I can tell, a younger audience. So it was really interesting to me that you were on doing it that way. So, but I'm going to let you get into that story. In fact, we're going to just, unless Dan, you want to throw anything else in there, we're going to just jump right in and let you tell your story, Dan, and go from there. Floor is yours.
Okay. Well, if there's any questions, feel free to ask, because whichever direction this goes, that's good. But I got married in 1996, and we wanted a bunch of kids, and I adopted my stepdaughter, and we had another girl, and my wife always wanted a son. I always thought it'd be neat to have a son, so we had Danny in 1999, and right when we had moved to Texas, I had gotten a job down there with a company that paid phenomenal. And when we got down there, they said, "Oh, we've been bought out, and your pay will be a third less than we agreed on." So I said, "Well, I can't work with you guys, if we're starting off like this." And went home. We were staying with my in-laws, and my wife's, of course, upset about that. And a few days later, she comes in crying. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm pregnant," and it was Danny, and it was fine. I had a job pretty soon, and he was just a joy. He was curious about life. He was excited. He was a handful. Oh my gosh, he was such a handful as a child. We were at the Dover Mall one time years later. He might have been, he'd have been 2 or 3 years old, maybe a year and a half. I dozed off. I'm a truck driver, so I work 70 hours a week, and my wife had gone in the store. Danny was locked in the stroller, or strapped in the stroller, and I dozed off. She comes out, and he's gone, and we start looking for him. She goes down to the food court, and here's this great big heavy set old security guard running down trying to chase my son, because he knows this kid doesn't have a parent with him. And Danny's running, slowing down, looking over his shoulder, and when the guy catches up to him, taking off again and just laughing. So this is the kind of kid he was. I found out at his funeral that he was in the theater, and my wife is diabetic, so he understood low blood sugar and all, and after a long practice, people's blood sugar would get low, and he stashed food up in the ceiling tiles in the kids' room, and would if kids started getting grumpy or something like that, "Come on back here." And anyway, just a joy of a kid. He was a pain in the butt. He was a tough kid too sometimes, but he had such a personality that was going to be. When she was pregnant with my next child, I used to take him on the truck because she was so violently ill, and so he was again about a year and a half old, and he'd hear me get out of bed, and he'd be thump 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 thump. His feet thumped real when he walked back then. It was like a monster running through the house. He'd run downstairs, and Tina would have gotten up to make us lunch. And he'd grab his car seat and grab his lunchbox, and "Mama, I'm going to work." So anyway, so he'd had mono a couple times and had strep a couple times, and we were sort of stumped. And the week before we lost him, he went to work at AutoZone right across the street here in Centerville, and he had an episode where he said, "I almost passed out." And it's like everything faded out. He said, and I sat down, and after a few minutes, everything was fine. And I thought, I know a lot of old truck drivers with COPD and heart disease that have very similar issues, but my son's 18 years old. So, because I thought, man, this seems a lot like a heart issue, but he's 18 years old, and he had just been a month prior to the hospital in Easton for a, I can't remember if it was the strep. It was a strep. It was real bad strep. And they had done a chest x-ray and said everything's fine. So he gets sick again, and I remember when he got sick, because the day before he got sick, I took him to school. He gets out of I got this little purple Mitsubishi Mirage. I'm actually sitting in it right now, and it's a funny looking car. But I drop him off, 18-year-old kid. He turns around like he always did, and he said, "I love you, Daddy," right in front of his friends and everybody. And I thought, you can't ask for a lot from a kid, but if a kid is bold enough to look at you and say, "I love you, Daddy," at 18 years old in front of his friends, that's something. I don't know what it is, but it's something. And I remember thinking that. And then he got sick, and for a couple days later, he'd been throwing up. So we took him down here. We've got a freestanding emergency room in Queenstown, about 5 miles from the house, because we thought he was dehydrated. My wife came home from work early. She's like, "We need to take him to the emergency room." And I had intended to. I worked nights at Pilot Flying J, driving tractor trailer hauling fuel, and I'd gotten in at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was exhausted, and she comes home about 11. She's like, "We need to take him to the emergency room." And I said, "Well, yeah, we're going to. Let me get a couple hours." She said, "No, we need to take him now." So we took him down. They rehydrated him, and something looked funny with his EKG. So they said, "Let's keep him." And as the sun had just started to set, must have been 4 o'clock or something like that. They said, "We're going to transfer him. Would you prefer to go to Easton or to Annapolis?" And both of them are decent hospitals. And I had this flash in my mind. I was like, I ought to send him to University of Maryland, but that'd be silly to ask that. And so they took him to Easton, which is a fine hospital. And we get there. My wife rides with him in the ambulance. I come home, but this is back just before the COVID thing, so you could actually go to the hospital, you could ride in the ambulance stuff. I come home to get some stuff and meet her there. And she said, a lady came up from the ER. She had seen his stuff. She had made friends with him the last time. She said she called the helicopter. She looked at me and said, "I think he needs to go to University of Maryland." I sort of put my career at risk for this. I told him the family wanted the helicopter. But if you don't want it, I'll just deal with the consequences and tell them no. But I said, "Well, look, she runs the ER." I said, "You know what you're doing. It's fine." So the one doctor there seemed a little offended by it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to hurt his feelings, but this is my son. And you guys have kids. You understand those feelings. It's at some point you got to be an advocate for your kid. And this lady who understands, who sees people coming in and sees when they're bad, says this kid needs more than we've got here. So that's all happening. And all of a sudden he starts getting a little confused. I remember I had a magazine. We were just sitting there, and I said, he asked me to come over, and I grabbed his hand, which was odd. He was an affectionate kid. He'd give you a hug, but he wanted me to hold his hand. And I had a magazine. I think it was a car magazine. He asked me to read to him, so I started reading to him, and all of a sudden he started not making sense. And the doctors walked in, and they're like, "Yeah, we got to get this kid on a ventilator. We're not sure what's up." I forget what the thing is they thought it was, but they said it wasn't tracking. The EKG wasn't tracking exactly like it would for that. So I looked at him, and I bold-faced lied. I said, "Son, this is an amazing team. They've got you. They've got you. They're going to figure this out. We'll see you when you wake up. They're going to put you under to put you on this ventilator. I thought they might be, but I didn't know. But I don't know. I figured I needed to give him some confidence. They took him back to the ICU, and they asked us to go down to this little chapel/waiting room. And we sat there, and I remember, I don't know how long it was, maybe an hour and a half later, a bell dinged on the on the loudspeaker, and they said, "Code blue, code blue." And I looked at my wife, and I said, "Boy, some families having a whole lot worse night than we are." And it wasn't 30 seconds later, a nurse comes in the room and sort of, I don't know how to explain it, sort of like she didn't want to say the words. And you got to come back. You got to come back with us. And we go go to the ICU, and he's coded, and they're starting to run a code on him, and my wife. My wife says, "This can't be happening to us. This can't be happening to us." But I thought, they run codes all the time. He's a young, healthy kid. And I see, and these people, they were competent with the equipment that they had. I was a medic in the reserves after I got out off active duty, and I worked down at Wilford Hall in San Antonio, which is a big trauma center. In my training, these people ran a code like a code should be run. I mean, they did everything right. If they had a miscommunication, it was nice to be in there. If they had a miscommunication, I was there. And I'm going to tell you, just as an aside, be there and be an advocate for your patient, for your family, because they can't be perfect. And they would say, "Well, this happened," and I'd be like, "Well, no, they wrote that down wrong. This is what happened down at the emergency room or whatever." But other than that, I mean, everything was done correctly and organized. But now they're like, "Well, we got to call for a helicopter." And Danielle, the lady down at the emergency room, said, "That's already been done." So they wanted to get him over to University of Maryland. They have a machine called the ECMO. They're actually using it if it's available for people with COVID now. It takes your blood out and oxygenates it. And they just didn't have it at small hospitals. So they come in, the helicopter lands, and there's things that just sort of stick in your head. Of course, his chest is uncovered, and they're hitting him with the paddles, and he's coming back a little bit, getting a heartbeat. And the lady said, we just need, and I don't remember the number. I think it was 23 minutes. It's 19 minutes flight to University of Maryland, and a few minutes to get him to the hospital or to the helicopter, and a few minutes to get him down. And we just need him to be stable for that long. And one of the ladies from the helicopter took a turn, and she was sitting there doing compressions on his chest. And her tears falling down on my son's chest. I mean, these people gave it everything. So at some point, we realized that the heartbeats weren't staying organized for a long enough time, and it might not work out. So I called my daughters, got 5 of them now, and I said, "You guys might want to come down. They're going to fly Danny. You might want to see him. This is serious. I don't think it's going to go south, but this might be your chance to see your brother." They came in. This whole process went on for, I don't know, 4.5 hours, something like that. And they went in with a heart catheter, and I forget what they were. Maybe it was just to deliver the medicines or the shock from inside. I can't remember. But the only thing they had was one from the leg, and you can damage the heart with that. We still don't know if that's what killed him, but that's a question that I wasn't going to ask because they did everything they could correctly with everything they had. The whole time I'm there, I remember I was holding on to his foot saying, "Come on, son, you got this." My wife was singing to him in his ear. They were so kind. In between the work they did on him, there's a lot of dead time, and even in an emergency like that, my wife was holding his hand and singing in his ear. And after a while, the doctor, he'd done it throughout the night. I don't know how familiar you guys are. You've seen it on shows and stuff. They look in your eyes, and what they're looking for is to see if your pupils dilate. And his eyes got less and less reactive to light. And I was seeing that. I understood where this was going. I didn't want to, but our pastor had come in. The pastor from when we had been younger, the current pastor, we had just changed to a church here in town. We had gone to church 20 minutes away for years, and we just didn't feel like we were part of the community living that far away. but we called a pastor who knew us and knew the kids. He came in and sat with us, and finally the doctor looks at us and he said, the patient doesn't appear to be recovering. And my wife really took umbrage with that because, I mean, this is her son laying there. He was just trying to do his job and stay focused, I know, but he said, we need you to make a decision. Well, I'd seen this. I mean, my son wasn't staying, his heartbeat wasn't staying organized for more than just a minute or two, and they'd shocked his heart, I don't know, 25, 30 times. I mean, this was, he just wasn't going to make it long enough to go to University of Maryland. And I looked at my wife and I said, his eyes aren't reacting to light. The brain activity's not there. I mean, the damage is done. I mean, and they would have stayed and done it. They said they had for hours before if a parent's there, they want the parent's permission. And there was no reason to. I mean, the brain damage had been done. So I remember I couldn't say it. It felt so crass after the fact, but I was like, stop. And they did. I remember in that moment, my son wasn't there anymore. That body was not my son. I was disgusted by what remained, because it was so very much not him. And it felt bad. I actually heard somebody say on your podcast something similar. It felt validating because I felt so terrible, but it just wasn't him. And they said if you want to, they cleaned him up a little bit. Said you can stay as long as you need to. And my daughters didn't want to stay, and I didn't want to stay. But we had two cars by this point because I brought one and my daughters had brought one. And my wife wanted to spend a half hour or so with him, so I told her, are you going to be okay to drive home? And she said, yes, she would. So I took the girls home. I wasn't 10 minutes out of the hospital, and I got a phone call from the police. We need to do an autopsy on your son. We're going to take his body, and I was angry. I was like, man, you can't even give me 10 minutes to lose my son. I called his pediatrician, and I said, sorry. I said, we lost Danny. He didn't understand. I had to explain it to him 2 or 3 times. And finally, I said, they want to do an autopsy. And I told him how angry I was. And he said, they're doing it the wrong way, but you need to get the autopsy done. He said, they're not showing any empathy, any whatever. He said, but you need to get the autopsy done. We need to find out what happened. You've got all these other kids. We need to know if there's something that we need to look at for them, which is what I needed to hear, because I was obviously emotional. And from there, I mean, it really hit the whole community. Because he was that kid at school. I mean, if I had kid after kid after kid contact me on Facebook and just say, my boyfriend had been abusive to me, and Danny sat and talked with me and said, hey man, you got to leave this, or I was having a really bad day, and Danny came in and he didn't even know me and said, hey, you're having a bad day. Whatever. Just sat with him, talked to him, patted him on the back. He was that kid, and we got home. My wife and daughters were obviously devastated. I knew I was going to have to go back to work, So I thought, you know what? There's some things I can do to take the load off of them. And if I've got to deal with this later, then I'll just deal with it now, and that'll be my job. And that probably helped me get through it. I wrote the eulogy with help from his siblings and cousins, and he was very close to his cousins. And my wife and I did help arrange the funeral. We had him cremated. Can I run get a tissue real quick?
Absolutely.
It'll just take a half second. Okay, sorry about that.
No.
I had not expected it to be that emotional this far out. It hits me at times. I'll be driving or something and it'll hit me, but it was just sort of like I was back there. So I was able to. I figured if I've got to do this, if somebody's got to do it, I'll do it, and it may as well not be everybody. So we cremated him. Some people had issue with that, not my family, some close friends, and I thought that was, I don't know, it was not not their business in the long run, and it just added to the struggle. But I think there was 500 or 600 people at his viewing, and I don't even know who was at his funeral. I've got the book, but I don't. Some things you just, I'll sit down and look at it one day. Several people spoke with 2 of his teachers and 2 of his friends that were kids who had really, really struggled with life, and he had just sort of taken the time to become their friends.
Can you PM him?
Yeah, 1 second.
Oh, there he goes. Okay.
Is he coming back in?
We'll see, hopefully.
Can you splice all this together?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
There we go. We got you, Danny. You're good.
We good?
Yep.
Yep, you're doing great.
Okay.
Take your time.
So it became sort of combative. I mean, this guy came down and wrote me up every chance he could. I delivered a load 4 minutes early one time. It was supposed to deliver Sunday. I delivered it Saturday at 11:56. I ended up losing that job, and I found out later that he had done that to several people who lost family members. And you don't know what's in somebody's head. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy. Finding out that it wasn't just something with me was nice to know. Just because you feel like you've done something wrong, but your life fell apart. And so I did a lot of writing, and I shared my writing on Facebook because I knew the one thing that struck me losing a kid was I thought that immediately after I thought nobody else has ever experienced this pain. It's very isolating. And as I started to process it through writing and mainly through writing and sharing it on Facebook with my friends, I found out that it's not odd that you lost a child. It's odd that you got to live this much of your life without a major trauma. I mean, there's so much heartache and pain out there, and we're just lucky living in a first world country to be able to insulate ourselves from it. So that's a nutshell of the whole thing. And now I try to process. The whole TikTok thing is I try to find ways to process that my processing doesn't get wasted, if that makes any sense. It seems like if I've got to go through it, some other people who have gone through stuff like this have really been there for me. And so if I can be there for a few other people, it hasn't been completely in vain. I mean, I would never lose a child to be able to help people, obviously. But if you've lost a child, it seems a waste for your pain and your processing it and all the work you put into living life and being here tomorrow for that to go to waste. And I think I've heard you guys say as well, I've got this elbow issue between that pain and having lost Danny and working around heavy machinery all night. I mean, there were times over and over again where it was just like, man, if I stuck my hand in that auger, it wouldn't hurt anymore after, a few minutes. And you don't want to kill yourself, but it sure would be nice not to feel the pain. And my counselor from the hospice told me, what you're experiencing is normal. And again, anytime somebody says that this terrible pain that you're feeling is normal, it's so very validating, and it allows you to take a breath and say, okay, somebody else has dealt with this. So we had our hospice is right across the street here in Centerville, and somebody told us they had counselors, and my hospice counselors, one of the big reasons that I was able to work through it, an old friend from, I don't know if you were familiar with a website called Zanga. It was a blogging website, and I've got an old cowboy friend from Texas who I've actually never met. He was a medic and a firefighter, and he's dealt with a lot, and we both write stories. Not fiction stories about stuff that's happened. So he and I were good friends from back then, and he just sort of stepped right in and became a shoulder to lean on. And an old friend who saved my marriage once, an old psychologist who was a friend of ours from church, sort of stepped in and became the other, sort of a tripod between my counselor and those two. And we all live far apart except for my counselor. And they were just there to, hey, how you doing? I know it's a tough time. I know you're angry. It's okay. That's normal, and we work through it. I have found, I hear over and over on these grief websites, I follow 3 of them, I think. People say, oh, I've got to lie and say I'm feeling good. And I've learned that, and it may be something I should have learned when I was, 5 years old. I don't know. But that you don't feel emotions alone. You can be so overwhelmingly sad and yet happy and enjoying your family at the same time, and at peace with life. And what I found was, in a lot of situations where it's not appropriate for you to express your overwhelming grief, you don't have to, because the people who care understand it's there. And you can be happy, and you can just express your happiness, or you're at peace, or you're calm, or even your anger at something else. And it's not lying like a lot of people tell you it is. It's just I'm letting you see the emotion that I have that's appropriate for the situation, and either you're not close enough to care about the rest of it, or else you already know, and I know that you care. So I've just got to keep that in check for the current time being. I don't know, and I don't know if that's just a semantic way or something, but it seems to help me to know that I can still be experiencing grief and I can still be happy, and I don't feel guilty about it, because if you're somebody I've just met, somebody at work, you may not care that I lost my son, or it may not be something that we need to waste a day on. You may just it's something that's best kept separate from us. I don't know. I think I've become much more mindful of my emotions and how I express them. So I don't know how I got off on that, but anyway, so we've had a very supportive community. People who I thought were very were friends on the surface just stepped in and helped people who we thought were good friends stepped back. And I had a friend who had just sent her son to Afghanistan, and she and I have been close since college. And I called just to say, hey, man, I lost my son. Just to have a shoulder to lean on before the other people stepped up. She's like, Dan, I can't deal with this right now. And my feelings were very hurt. Of course, you're all over the place anyway. But with time and perspective, I look, she's concerned about losing her son. And whether it was good or bad, it was a valid experience. So other friends stepped in. People raised a GoFundMe to help. I always tell people, that cheap life insurance they offer at work, buy it. You guys, one of you's military, I guess, so you don't have to. But whatever, carry $20,000 or $30,000. Give yourself, heaven forbid this ever happens, give yourself the opportunity to take a breath. My counselor, when I met her the first time after about 6 weeks, said, so when are you going to go back to work? And I laughed, and I was like, I've been back at work for a month. People are resilient, and you do what you have to do, and you function, and you get by. And if you've got a support system, if you ever get to the point where you are suicidal or something like that, hopefully they step in. But you do what you have to do, and then our family's been very supportive as I start to process it, because I think I've processed it slower. My wife is a lot in the same place as I am. We obviously had two separate losses. Your relationship with your child is not the same as your spouse's. And one of the things that a friend told me that may have saved our marriage is that you don't have to be at the same place at the same time as your spouse. You're grieving two completely separate losses. Sometimes you both are grieving and you've got to set yours aside and be there for her. And in a good relationship, she'll do the same to you, and she has. But just finding out what should happen before it happens gives you sort of a framework to work through it. Anyway, I listened to you guys' stories and had to turn them off a couple times because they're so very different, but they're the same. The anger that you'll never get to see what your kid was. Danny was going to be an automotive engineer. He's going to school for 2 years to be a mechanic and then off to engineering school. He was just a super, super book smart kid. Never had any interest in automotives when I tried to teach him as a kid. And then in high school, he's like, I'm taking an automotive shop. And he went, his teacher absolutely loved him. He said, I've never had such a blank slate. But I listen to you guys' stories, and it's like, it's so very different, but so very much the same. And it's nice to to hear some people talk about it in an organized setting. It's been very cathartic for me to start to work through the podcasts. One of the encouraging things for me, and one of the groups I think you guys is a child loss grief thing or something. I see these people come in the day after they lose their child, and your feelings are still so overwhelming. We're 4 years in, and I had the realization maybe a year ago that this is still life changing. It's something I'll probably live with forever in some way, but whatever they're experiencing, I experience, but I'm not there anymore. And again, it's just one of those things. It's always been there. It's always existed like that. Life moves on, but you don't realize it because it creeps so slowly until you look at somebody else and their fresh grief, and you're like, wow, I was there, but I'm not anymore. I don't know what that means about where I'm at now, but life moves on, and I don't know. So I guess that's like I say, the story in a nutshell. Was there any questions you guys had, or how you relate to things, or?
Yeah, Dan. First off, thanks for coming on. We know this isn't easy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about Danny. He sounds like an amazing son, and of course, we're very sorry for your loss with him. And as I was listening to your story, I think it was Rachel who we had on, our very first guest. Remember, Dan? I think she was the one that said, when her husband passed away, they asked if she wanted time with him, and she said, "No, I don't want any time. That's not my husband."
It was her. I just heard her last week.
Yeah. So, one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to ask you is, I like how you said the tripod effect, like with counselors and help, other people helping you. I thought it was important that you said that, because getting through grief, it's so hard to do, and doing it alone almost seems like an impossible. I know I couldn't do it alone. And you having that tripod effect of people helping you from all different directions, counselors, even people you've only met online, but you guys working through grief together. I think that's important for listeners that are listening. Like, if you're going through any kind of grief, don't try to do it yourself. Dan, what do you guys think about that? Do you think, I know it's different for everybody as you go through it, but for me, I had to go to counseling right away. I couldn't even function without it. But I know some people wait a little bit longer. So either Dan that wants to jump in and kind of just talk about counseling and how it's affected you guys, I think that'd be a good help.
Well, I didn't know it was available through hospice. I was concerned about money. My wife ended up going back to work a little bit and then just stopping. I told her, you lost your son. And I just think that a mother's loss is as completely life-shattering as your loss is. A mother's loss is even worse. I don't know how to explain it, but I think it is. But so I was concerned about money. I didn't want to pay a counselor when we needed to pay bills. And somebody told me that hospice offered free counseling, and I thought, I need to at least give it a crack. And thank God they were there. I mean, they're a couple hundred yards away from here. I don't know if I could have made it alone. I'm glad I didn't have to try. There was a lot asked of me that I was happy to shoulder up on, but there was a lot given to me. I mean, it's as horrible as these things are. You see your spouse's character, and you see the character of the people around you, and I'm glad I've got the friends I have, because you say it made it easier. I mean, it's so hard even with it being made easier. But I mean, honestly, it's such a big load. How do you? I can't imagine dealing with it alone. There was a time I've got bursitis in my elbow, and it's super painful, like a broken bone painful if I hit something with it. And there was a time just recently, within the last 6 months, that I hit it, and I thought it hurts so bad. I thought if I had a gun, I'd put it in my mouth. It hurts because all that pain that you've created this shell. I know I'm off subject. And under most situations, you can manage the pain, but this thing hurts so bad, and all the emotional pain just comes back. And I had to pull off on the shoulder and stop. And but you've got people there who've told you this is normal, and when they told you this is normal, you're like, okay, well, if I could, I would end this, but I'm glad I don't. I'm glad I can't, because 30 minutes from now, it won't hurt as bad, and stuff like that is stuff that you just wouldn't have if you didn't have people helping you and telling, I mean, it's so powerful for somebody to tell you it feels awful, but it's normal. You guys said in one of your podcasts, the things that go on in your head are just awful, but when a counselor says no, they're not awful. It's the body's response to trauma. You can take a little bit of a breath and say, okay, it still hurts just as much, but okay, I can, if everybody else handles it, if everybody else feels this way too, and if it's a normal response, if you got your arm cut off, there's some things that would be normal that are not normal now. I don't know, counseling and friends who are counselors who aren't certified, but who, in practice do it, has been a huge help to me. Like I say, I don't know what you could do I don't know what I could have done if I didn't have them. I'm sure you learn how to deal with it. But anyway, that's my experience.
I think everybody needs that support network, and it's an individual thing of who that network is, whether it's professional counselors or friends or colleagues or whatever. I went to one professional session. The lady was fine, but I could tell after one session that I had two friends through church who had already stepped up, who were going to provide me at least equal opportunity to express what I was going through and be the ears I needed, where I didn't feel like this lady was going to be able to give me anything more to justify the extra time that is so valuable. So I went the way of my friends. Um, there's some people that don't have those friends. So it's an individual thing. The key thing is we've got to find those people wherever they are that we can call on when we need them. I think one thing you said, Dan, that struck out to me too is your friend that you called and they told you openly, I can't handle this. I give that friend mad props because I worry tremendously that I'm a drain on the people close to me. And no matter how much you know that they understand it, and no matter how much they tell you they understand it and it's okay, I still don't want to be a drain on people. And I worry about that all the time. And I hope that my friends will tell me, you know what, Dan, I love you, I support you, I want to be here, but this moment, I can't. I'm struggling myself. And I think that's a huge component that Chris and I haven't talked about that at all. I don't think ever. So I'm glad you brought that up, Dan.
I heard you guys saying, and maybe it was one or two of them, something about, I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was something to the effect that, you feel like it wasn't treading water, but like, you just can't. I wish I had gone back and found that exact spot. But anyway, again, a million people tell me a million things, and I can never tell who did it. But they're like, you don't have to be there for everybody. You don't, if you can be there for somebody. Oh, man, I wish I could remember what you guys said. But it's just, a hydraulic excavator or whatever takes a little tiny hose, and through the magic of physics, if you push a lot of fluid through a little tiny hose into a bigger actuator, it'll start to move that great big arm. And the whole thing is, I don't have to be. I mean, I'll never have the impact of a Jeff Bezos or a Billy Sunday if you're talking about preachers, or a Ronald Reagan or a Barack Obama if you're talking about presidents. But it's okay because I can be all the help somebody needs, because somebody did that for me. There's a few people that just did that for me, whether it was real counselors, but certified counselors. Several of my daughters just didn't click with their counselors and didn't continue on. My wife's counselor said, I'm not qualified to deal with complex grief. And like you say, kudos to her, because it allowed my wife to seek help elsewhere instead of staying in a relationship that wasn't where the counselor didn't feel like she had anything to help. All those things. I mean, it's you grab whatever rope's thrown at you, and whether that's a certified counselor or a friend or whatever. And in the same way with your other friends, you don't have to be there to help them all. It's when your skills line up with their need, and you can, it's your you have a chance to help, and you don't have to grab them all either. You just grab what you can. I've had the I don't know if it's joy. It's contributed to my PTSD, but I come up on accidents on the road, and I've had the ability to save a few people's lives. I pulled a guy out of a car that was upside down, and everybody was standing there looking at it, and the car was underwater. And I looked around, and you get over here and help me flip this car over. I've also come up on freshly dead bodies that the accidents just happened, the cops aren't there, and lied to people. And a guy's head was caved in from a car rolling over. We're back on a backcountry road, and I'm saying, man, it's going to be okay. I don't know what I feel like morally about that, but in the moment, I'm trying to keep this guy awake and like what I said about my son. Man, this team's they got you. I don't know. I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit, but in the moment, I'm trying to keep this guy awake and keep his neck still, and just make it where when the trauma team shows up, they have something to work with. And in those instances, I've driven by a million accidents, but when I can and when I have the ability, I pull over and I help. And I can't remember exactly where you guys related that, but you're like you feel helpless, like you can't ever be there for people or whatever. And my thing is, I don't feel guilty anymore when I don't, or I can't, or I choose not to because I have something else. Because I know that when I can and when I have the time, sometimes I'm able to pull over and stop. And my impact has been very important for that person. Somebody else's impact is going to have to be important for the other people because you can't solve the world's problem. So,
yeah,
all that from
that's a great point. Like, that was actually our last episode. We talked a little bit about helping others and how it helps us in our recovery of, or as we move through the grief process, helping others. And you're right, we can't help everyone in the world. You help who you can when you can with the skills you have, and if it makes you feel good because you've gone through that grief and you have that knowledge and that skill and ability, then there's nothing wrong with that, because it really does help in the long run. It helps both people, so why not, right? It's perfect. And I think that's what Dan and I were trying to convey in our last episode was, we've met, Dan and I have both met people that through their grief, they kind of stay in that initial state of grief, right? Like they Dan brings it up often, that person on Facebook that says they still can't get out of bed 20 years later. I don't want to be like that. I know Dan doesn't. It seems like you don't either, Dan. Helping other people, wow, what a difference it makes in your grief processing. So I'm gonna throw it over to the other Dan, let him ask you a question.
I don't really have a lot of questions. What I've appreciated listening to you say, Dan, is just a lot of little things that I'm hoping other grieving parents are hearing. You've said the word validation many times here, and that is so crucial. That every single person's grief is different. Even us three sitting here, we've all lost a son. We have a lot of things that we can talk about. Chris could share a lot about his experiences with the doctors. I could share a lot of my experiences in a small hospital, wondering about a big hospital. Like, we all have tons of similarities, which is helpful because it validates our experiences and our feelings. But at the same point, we're all so different, which is why we need that tripod of people to help us in that moment. This is what I'm going through. And you're not the right leg for me to stand on right now. You are. You've laid so many things out that I think are helpful for people. I think you've also made a couple great quotes that I just want to keep using over and over again, because I hope they'll help people, grieving or not. You said, it's not odd that you've lost a child, it's odd that you've lived this long without a major trauma. And since I lost Jameson, my awareness of how many kids in the world have died is so much stronger. Like, we know about the kids in the third world countries that are dying, but right here in our country, right here in my small town, the number of kids that have passed away is just sad. Okay. And then you go to people who have lost just any kind of grief. It's just amazing. And that statement really stuck with you. You made a statement. My processing doesn't get wasted. I love that. Yeah. Chris and I are trying to do that to help ourselves heal somewhat. But yeah, if we can be that leg for somebody to stand on at any point, love it. And then you just said, when your skills line up with their needs, you have a chance to help. And that's a statement. I think that's not a grief statement. That's a life statement, that we all have something we can do to help somebody who is hurting. And if you look to your left and your right now, you will see somebody that's hurting, whether they've openly admitted it or not and asked for help or not. This world is filled with people who are crushed and buried under the weight of something. And every one of us has a skill that can help somebody that's standing right next to us. So I just appreciate everything you've said today, Dan.
I appreciate you guys giving me the chance to come on. I really like what you all are doing. When I saw, I don't know, one of you posted on one of the grief groups on Facebook about the podcast, I thought that's going to be interesting. It was probably last year before you started it. And then I saw an episode come up, I don't know, a month ago, and I thought, let me dig through some of this. And then I contacted Chris, because I heard that he's in Dover, which is, it's a stone's throw away from where I live. And by the way, I still owe you a dinner.
Yep,
it's just nice to sit with somebody who understands, even if you talk about baseball or about, if I learn about being a fireman or whatever, it's just nice to be around somebody who gets it. The old psychiatrist friend of mine that I was telling you about, we went to church one Sunday. He looks at my wife. He's like, something's wrong. She and I have been having trouble. And he made a very difficult situation very easy just because he noticed. But my wife's like, one of the things that drew her to him to start with, he's probably 30 years older than us. She's like, I feel like he's lived enough of life that he gets me. And like you said, you went to your counselor and that didn't happen. And I really think that's a healthy thing to recognize that and to say, yep, this isn't going to be productive and my time is valuable and I need to try to get my help somewhere else. That takes a lot that a lot of people don't have, and that was a really intelligent move. People pressure you. Oh, you need counseling. You need this, because what worked for me is not going to work for you. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've really tried not to fall into is saying, oh my gosh, this works so well for me. You got to do this. And I appreciate that about you guys saying, the counseling really worked for one of you and it didn't work for the other. And yet we're both making it through. And for somebody else who's sitting there trying to figure it out, they can take a breath and say, okay, so it's a process. There's not a book about it. We've got to work our way through, but being able to make these decisions is normal. And you guys are really providing a forum for people to sit and listen and say, I'm normal, and man, we appreciate it. For speaking for your audience, we appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate the kind comments. I know when Dan and I first started this, we always say, like, we weren't even sure if anyone would actually listen. This was going to be for us to work through our grief. And through the time, Dan, you can probably feel the same. I feel better, like kind of like you said. It was, you would never, you said it earlier, Dan, you would never want to purposely lose your child to help other people. But if I lost my child, I'm going to try to help someone else through it if I can. And it's been therapeutic for me, and I think Dan as well. And I think, Dan, for you on your TikTok, you might not know it yet, but I guarantee you're probably helping someone too as you keep telling your story online like that.
Yep.
There's
So,
one more thing that just struck me, and I don't know how I stumbled on it, but somebody told me get a hobby. So I love music, and so I play guitar poorly. I have almost manically come to play guitar 15 minutes a day, at a minimum 15 minutes a day, and it's just become an anchor. That hobby has become an anchor to help my I don't know. It's like my day's a whole lot better if I can do that. And you know, it could be anything, but it's just I know that at some point during the day, I'm going to sit down in that chair and I'm going to play with my guitar for a little while. Matter of fact, my one daughter looked at me and she said, "I can't be here when you play the guitar." And I was like, "Why?" She said, "It makes me sad."
mm-hmm.
And at other times, she'll come sit and sing with me, but she understands the significance of those few minutes of the day. And some days it's an hour. I sit and play fun songs and laugh and have a good time. And some days it's just like I just got to grab the guitar. It's like that's my spot in the day that I know. There's the world shaking, and there's one spot I can grab onto, and if I've got that, then I can get through till tomorrow when I do it again. And it's silly, it's just playing the guitar, but for me that has been a huge help. And it could have been anything, radio controlled airplanes or you know, painting or whatever. But when whoever it was that said that to me, I thought of, you know, I know of people who sat and painted for similar things like that. And I thought it can't hurt, and man, it's a huge help. I say all that. I haven't mentioned my Christian faith. I'm not as vocal about it as I was. If you know me, you know I'm a Christian. And if you want to know any more, then I sit and talk to you. But I've become much less in people's face because I don't know what they need, you know. And if they need what I have on something like that, they can ask, and they will. So I mean that I can't discount the strength that my faith and faith community have given me, but the thing that the guitar thing is it's not equal to it, but it is it's a spot in the day that's not going to move. And you know, I don't know if maybe that'll help somebody or something, but to me, it's just been a huge help to have that one thing I can grab onto, and from there, the rest of the day can do whatever it wants.
I think I have real issues. Anybody that's listened to this knows this, and Chris knows this. I've been struggling with many aspects of Christianity and churches and all that. And I think your guitar example is a great example of what I've struggled with, where when tragedy hits and people are looking, what do I do? And they're asking friends, what do you do? And a lot of Christians, their response is pray. And yes, if you're a Christian, prayer is vital and that you need to do that. But for a person whose life was just shattered by the loss of a child and they're looking for, what do I do? What can I do to survive this moment? I love that somebody told you, you know what? Get a hobby. And it's turned into, for 15 minutes a day, you're over there doing something that is helping you. And it's so yeah, I'm not discounting prayer at all, but when people are
No, but it's the platitudes. What you're saying is so many people offer you so many just pat answers. You know, it just pops off there. They didn't even think about it. And we could talk an hour about church communities and stuff like that. I love my church community. We're at a different one now. My family couldn't go back to the sanctuary that we saw my son laying in, in the casket. And so we go to a different church. It's actually a block and a half away from the house. But yeah, there was so much of exactly what you're saying. You know, people would throw off about, oh, he's better, or God needed him more than you needed him, and they're darts. I mean, it's not the help that, I mean, maybe they think they're helping, but it's like somebody saying, oh yeah, you know, you got your hand cut off. Here, let me poke and prod at it some.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
You're on it. I mean, I am very careful not to throw a pat answer at somebody who's grieving, because it hurts so much. But I have a couple superstitions that are silly, and I know they're not true. I look up at night, and I'm outside a lot when it's dark, and I'll look up and I'll say, "Throw me one down, son," and every now and again I'll see a shooting star, and it makes me smile. And I know it's nothing, but it's a comforting thing. And I mean, as we're sitting here, there's two cardinals playing around in front of me, and that's not my son, but it makes me think about him. You know, everybody says it's a cardinal is a family member coming to visit, and I know that's not true, but it makes me think about him. So, and that's straight up superstitious stuff, and it's silly and it's whatever, but it helps.
I do the pennies, right? Pennies from heaven. That's what I say. When I see a penny on the ground, do I think Mason threw it down specifically from heaven? No, but does it make me think of Mason? Like, hey, maybe this was like a sign, like, because there's been times I was like, just like you, I was like, Mason, I need a penny, buddy. I need to see a penny just to think about you. And sure as all heck, that day I find a penny. I mean,
you're the first person I've ever run into who does the same thing or has admitted to it.
Yeah,
and I appreciate
him in admitting it. The pennies are important for me, and they do work. So, for me, that it does help, like you said.
So Dan, before we wrap up, tell everybody about your TikTok. What are you doing? What's your account? So that if they want to, they can follow you. Here's your chance for a shameless plug.
So I think my username is Fatal_Bert. My favorite character as a kid in the cartoons was Fat Albert, and that was taken, and every other thing I looked for was taken. So I'm Fatal_Bert, which is sort of a mix of the same words. Mm-hmm. But I just I have a minute or 3 minutes, depending on which format I choose, to share a little story about something, and it seems to be a focusing. It allows me not to ramble. You heard me, I ramble, and it really focuses, and I can pick one story or one thing or one aspect, and it helps me work through. And actually, my sister's found it, and she's like, "Man, I'm so glad you do that. It really helps me," because she was close to my son too. But I just for a minute I ramble on, or 3 minutes, and before I started this, I would post something I'd been playing on guitar, because my brother-in-law said this funny thing that stuck with me. He's like, everything has to be perfect these days, and you and your family sitting around playing guitar and singing has told me there's a lot of joy to be had in imperfection. And I told him, I said, well, that could be an insult, but I'm going to take it as a compliment. He said it was meant that way. But so I also, every now and again, will throw up a piece I play on guitar or something like that. And it's not perfect. It's just something that I've enjoyed. But mostly I sit down and I sit down. I'm in the truck. I turn that thing on, and I think about it for a few minutes before, but I really try to go off the cuff and just have a focused minute or 3 minute blurb about, a little bit about Danny, or about us before Danny or after Danny, and hopefully, I mean, it helps me. Hopefully, it helps. It seems like every now and again somebody pops on and says, "Hey, man, I appreciate you doing this." So that's all I can ask for. I don't imagine I'll ever be a star or whatever. That's not what I'm going after. I'm going after that sort of little corner, the dark corner of the internet, where somebody's back there crying because they think they're alone, and I can say, hey, hold on a second, brother, you're not alone. There's somebody here to throw his arm around you and say it's normal. And if that happens, once a week or twice a week or something like that, man, I've done exactly what I'm aiming at.
Well, that's
sort of
awesome.
What you guys are doing on here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's FATAL_BERT.
Correct.
Right? All right. And I love it. I mean, yeah, I read it the other night. I'm like, Fatal_Bert? Okay, what is that? And Fat Albert. Look, that's a great show.
Everybody always said, oh, I feel sorry for Fat Albert. I'm like, I thought Fat Albert was the star of the show, man. He was cool. Life threw crap at him, and he was heavy-set, and it was, everything that everybody makes fun of, and he's just like going through life oblivious. He's building his car out of an airplane engine or whatever, Anyway, so.
Well, Dan,
I appreciate it.
Really, really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciated hearing Danny's story. Definitely brought back some memories for me. A lot of similarities, but also some differences, like we talked about, like Dan said. And he sounds like he was an amazing son. Yeah, he is an amazing son. And I'm glad we were able to have you on and we could hear about him and know more about him. And you're always welcome to come back anytime you want. And we'll be following on TikTok and seeing how you're progressing with your story. And I'm gonna throw it over to Dan, let his get his final comments in. But I really appreciate you taking the time coming on today.
So reach out if you don't have somebody to talk. I'm not talking to you two, but you two are included. Just reach out on Facebook Messenger or something. I'm Daniel McCreary. Man, if you need to unload and somebody just shut their mouth and listen, just reach out. If I can help, I'll be happy to help.
Yep. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. I will throw the disclaimer out there for anybody watching the YouTube. Dan is in his car, but it is parked. He has not been driving this whole time while talking. He's nice and safe and sound, just letting his family sleep. But yeah, Dan, thank you so much. I hope we get a lot of grieving people that are listening to this and hear what you're talking about with validation, and that it helps them. So thank you, sir.
Well, you guys have been a huge help. A big counseling session this morning. Thanks.
All right. And with that,
We'll talk
guys,
to you later.
we'll wrap up this episode of A Father's Love, Healing Through Heartache.